Greetings. Welcome from North Central Texas College, Flower Mound campus, where Mr. Eads, will be discussing a video assignment on the presidents of the 1850s, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan, the presidents during the decade of disunion. First, Millard Fillmore. He is considered the forgotten president, as most people jump straight from Taylor to Pierce. Fillmore was nominated vice president in 1848 to appease the Henry Clay faction of the Whig Party. In fact, he didn't even know his own boss, Zachary Taylor, until after the election. Fillmore was a self-taught lawyer and a son of tenant farmers in upstate New York. He spoke slowly and he used common language, which, by the way, is not a good trait for the 19th century, but quite useful now. Don't believe me? Ask George W. Bush. While president, Fillmore received an honorary degree from Oxford University in England, but he refused it because he could not read the Latin on the diploma. His family, his wife was Abigail. She was 2 years older than Millard, and she waited 6 years before Millard finally proposed to her. They had 2 children, Millard Jr. and Mary. 3 things are notable for Fillmore's 2.5 years as president. First, he signed the Compromise of 1850 that settled the question of slavery in the territories for the moment. This issue, the expansion of slavery into the territories, is the crux of the entire decade. Fillmore also sent Commodore Matthew Perry to visit Japan. This begins American-Japanese relations. It awoke the sleeping dragon, and it creates problems for the United States in the 20th century. And last, just important to me, Fillmore signed the first land grant to a railroad. This railroad, the Illinois Central. But the Whigs passed on Fillmore in 1852. They did not let him run for re-election, mostly because they had a war hero in General Winfield Scott. This proves to be a mistake, as Scott is beaten by the Democrat Franklin Pierce, and Millard Fillmore becomes the last Whig president in U.S. history. Franklin Pierce, the 14th president, from 1853 to 1857. An undistinguished gentleman, but yet handsome, and as such, he never lost an election. He would have been great in the years of television. Biggest problem with Franklin Pierce is that he suffered from worry and doubt in a time when decisive leadership was needed. And his worry and doubt all stems from one incident, the loss of his son Benny in a train accident. Pierce and his wife Jane walk away from this accident, but not before watching their son Benny get mangled. In fact, Pierce's wife Jane never recovers. She stayed on the second floor of the White House for the entirety of Pierce's administration and refused to exercise her duties as First Lady. For 2 years, she wrote letters to her dead son. And as far as Pierce is concerned, this accident only increased his doubt when leadership was needed. Also notable about Franklin Pierce is that he was college roommates with author Nathaniel Hawthorne. In fact, Hawthorne was Pierce's campaign biographer, and as senator from New Hampshire, Pierce helped Nathaniel Hawthorne get a job at the Boston Customs House, where Hawthorne served as a tax collector by day, and at night he wrote his classic, The Scarlet Letter. As president, Franklin Pierce, first, probably the most notable thing he did was name Nathaniel Hawthorne consul to Liverpool, therefore guaranteeing his friend a full-time job. But Pierce, overall, chose the reality of the Union over the vague promise of emancipation. Pierce, being from New Hampshire, did not approve of slavery, but he went along with the peculiar institution anyway. And he thought slavery was limited to geography and that abolition had an uncertain future. Southerners thought they could control Franklin Pierce. And as it turns out, Franklin Pierce, his leadership could not hold the North and the South together. Historian Alan Nevins wrote, Franklin Pierce was one of the quickest, most gracefully attractive, and withal weakest of the men who have held the highest office. By 1856, Pierce's indecisiveness in resolving the issue of slavery in the territories convinced the Democrats to reject Pierce for renomination, and they chose a third option, James Buchanan. Buchanan, who becomes President of the United States in 1856, he's the 15th president, He defeats John C. Fremont, the first candidate of the Republicans. Buchanan might just be the last Federalist left. Buchanan was 66 years old when elected, was born in 1791. Buchanan was a career politician, a congressman and senator from the state of Pennsylvania for over 20 years. He was Polk's Secretary of State, and in fact, he will be the last Secretary of State elected President of the United States. He was a diplomat to both Russia and Great Britain. The main reason Buchanan was chosen in 1856 is because he was not in the United States to take a stand on the slavery issue. Plus, he owed political debts, and that reinforced his belief that concessions had to be made to the South to save the Union. Basically, the debts he owed, the South came to collect. Also, Buchanan is unique because he is the only unmarried president of the 44. Buchanan had planned to get married in 1818, but his fiancée, Anne Coleman, died from depression after her parents convinced her to call off the wedding. As president, Buchanan's niece, Harriet Lane, served as the official White House hostess. There was no First Lady. There is speculation that James Buchanan was gay, but that's unproven. He had a relationship with Rufus King, Franklin Pierce's vice president, but the only substantial part of this is that the two men shared a home in Washington for 15 years. Both were career politicians. According to Buchanan's biographer, Jean Baker, she wrote, "The best speculation about the sexuality of a non-shaving Buchanan, who in his portraits has a eunuch-like endomorphic features of body and face, as well as a low hairline characteristics of asexual men with low levels of testosterone, is that he had little interest in sex. What is important in his story is the deep friendship that he maintained with Rufus King from the time of their first acquaintance to King's death in 1853. Foreign policy? Buchanan had a philosophy of pacifism. He hated war. He opposed war. This is one reason why he did little to prevent the Civil War in 1861. Buchanan believed that the Constitution's checks and balances would prevent war between the sections. He also believed that if he took too much power from Congress, it would destabilize the government. On these 2 points, historian David Rubel writes, "Had Buchanan had been half the leader that Abraham Lincoln was, the course of American history would surely have been changed. But Buchanan wasn't a man to influence or instruct those about him." Now, although Buchanan really wanted to be president, and as Secretary of State drove James K. Polk nuts with these desires, there are 3 things that undid the Buchanan administration: the Dred Scott decision, the fight over Kansas, and the economic depression of 1857. These items we'll be discussing in class. Overall assessment of these 3 presidents: Fillmore is best known. The forgotten president fits him well. He's only president for 2.5 years. He did not do much, and it's on his watch that the slide to the Civil War begins. Pierce's doubt overshadows his administration, and when leadership is needed in Kansas, Pierce cannot provide it. In the case of Buchanan, Dred Scott was a terrible decision, the lowest moment in the history of the Supreme Court. Kansas got even bloodier on his watch. The economic depression just made things worse. Under Buchanan, the election can't be held correctly. And by 1861, as Southerners are demanding foreign federal forts because they are in the process of seceding, Buchanan does nothing to stop them. In my own opinion, Buchanan is one of the worst, if not the worst, president of the United States. And unfortunately, Pierce and Fillmore follow in the bottom half as well. Thank you for watching this video assignment on the 3 presidents of the decade of disunion, and may the force be with you on the next exam.